when it comes to the CIA and the FBI getting out of control, I like when I see the title of your book, was there a time that they were heroes? Because I mean, I maybe that's pessimistic of me to say, but you hear the beginning of the FBI. It's Hoover. He's into all the corruption and blackmail and stuff. You got the Dulles brothers, the CIA, and George H.W. Bush. You hear crazy stories about that. So what when exactly were they heroes? Was there like a time where they were operating like as patriots? Because I wanted to work for the CIA for a period of time too, but then once I started learning about like how they operate, I'm like, oh wow, they actually aren't so good all the time.
Well, first, here's the subtitle of the book, as you just said, Cold War Heroes
Yeah.
to Deep State Villains. I really believe very strongly that they were Cold War heroes. But what people tend to do is to look at everyone's faults and
Hmm.
everyone's mistakes and everyone's dumb decisions or just bad decisions or bad people doing something, or then other things that look kind of crooked, but that was the way it was done at the time, and it really was a net benefit to all of us as Americans. But let's look at J. Edgar Hoover.
Hmm.
When he was 25 years old, it was 1920. He was a
Yeah.
Justice Department lawyer, fresh out of law school, and he was put in charge of a tiny unit called the Radicals Division
Mm.
inside the FBI. And his job was to identify and to round up all the foreigners who had come to this country as radical socialists, anarchists, and communists. And this was at a
Mm.
time when we had had a president, McKinley, who was assassinated by an anarchist, and you had President Teddy Roosevelt, who was shot not by an anarchist, but still, you had terrorist violence, you had bombings, you had the bombing at the Attorney General's house. I think the governor, mayor of Chicago, or governor of Illinois, I don't remember, was killed in one of these bombings. But it was a widespread bombings of terrorism in the early few years of the 1900s, even before World War One.
Oh wow.
And then the Bolshevik Revolution going on in Russia. But who was here? Who was in New York before the Bolshevik Revolution in 1917? But Leon Trotsky, the founder of
Mm.
the Bolshevik Red Army. So he was here agitating people. So J. Edgar Hoover's job was to find these people, round them up, deport them back to Russia. And
Oh
for a
okay. Wow.
25-year-old with no experience and with little help and with few laws governing it, and none of the computer, resources that we have. It was all, primitive telephone and telegraph, working with local cops everywhere. He did as good a job as he possibly could, but he made some mistakes. And he's
Yeah.
been crucified all those years for those mistakes. Look, early on, now that he made other mistakes, imagine being 48 years as head of anything, right? You're going to get long in the tooth. You're going to
Yeah.
make it your own personal fiefdom. You're going to have abuses. But if you look at what he did, he was so his first job, and then when he went and became FBI director, was really to round up extremists from other countries and to get them out of here. He only had a limited capability to do that, and because then we had the crime waves coming on in the 1920s and 30s when we needed, or it was perceived that we needed larger federal law enforcement. But
Yeah.
if you go through his writings, which is what I did in writing the book, and I knew a lot of people who knew him, and he was always warning about Marxist infiltration of our society going back to 1920. They're infiltrating our schools, they're infiltrating our seminaries, our churches, our news media, our entertainment, our economy, everything, politics. And he was constantly, our government, constantly warning against this. So who's going to trash him for saying this? Well, the
Right.
people that he's warning about, right? And so
Right.
they hate him. So a lot of the histories of Hoover and even the news accounts at the time of Hoover were what a terrible guy he is because he's seeing this phantom communists everywhere. But you look back at history, he was right.
Yeah, and we still got it today.
Yeah. So I think that, he was a Cold War hero. He busted a lot of Soviet spy rings early on. The people who passed our atom bomb secrets to Stalin.
Mm.
He
Oh
busted
wow.
those people and a whole lot more. And he was warning against Soviet penetration of our foreign intelligence service before we even had a CIA.
Oh wow. So what was it that was making that such an infectious, pervasive idea here? Is it just like the sales pitch of like the Marxist mentality of like that everybody should be equal, everybody should get the same thing, and that's just like an infectious mindset to the majority of people, or what? Like what exactly was it?
Well, it wasn't so much Marxism because or say sharing or even socialism because Hoover left the socialists alone. Nobody cared about the socialists. It's not a question of that. The thing is with the Communist Party members or members of foreign communist parties here, Back then, if you were a member of the party, it's called a vanguard party. So you do whatever the party tells you, and
Mm,
you swear an oath to do that, and you can never leave.
mm.
But you swore an oath to be loyal to the Soviet Union and to
Oh, wow.
overthrowing the United States government to create a United Soviet States of America. So
Oh,
they were
wow.
all acting as every party member was acting as agents of the Soviet Union, consciously doing so, willfully doing so. If you look at the protests in up to August 1939, it was hey, we have to beware of Hitler and the rise of fascism. But once Hitler and Stalin signed that secret pact, the U.S. Communist Party was saying, America first, no intervention in Europe, stay out of it. And they didn't come back to being patriotic to defend our interests until Operation Barbarossa in June 1941, when Hitler invaded, surprised Stalin and invaded the Soviet Union. Then the party says, oh, we all have to wave the American flag and we're all patriots and let's all together fight the fascists. So,
Mhm.
so you can say we're total tools. And we know about this in detail because why? Because the FBI was spying on them. The
Mm.
FBI was infiltrating them. It was informing Congress. It was informing the presidents, whatever president it was. It was informing our military, and so it was operating great. But then there were people who were not party members, but whose friends were, or whose family members were, and they were socialists or leftists. And as you said, well, what's wrong with just sharing things and redistributing property? It's a different way of doing things. That's not a crime to talk that way, and it's not a crime. But whoever wasn't paying attention to them, unless he could follow their trails because they were operating out in the open,
Oh,
and
okay.
he needed to follow their trails to find the people who he needed to bust. So they were the ones out there in whether it was the New York Times or the Atlantic or the New Republic or whatever else, screaming against this terrible repression that the FBI is doing. Now, there were
So,
also times,
oh
I'll
no,
go
good.
on this one. There are also times when you're in a tight situation, you need to do something, you've got this Soviet military intelligence operation that's penetrating here, and there's no law for or against what you're doing. You just do it, and then you find out you've blown it. You've made a mistake. You've done something illegal. You violated something else. Those are mistakes that are going to happen even in the best of situations.
If you enjoyed the short clip, click right here to watch the full episode, and remember to subscribe to the channel. God bless.